Behind Reincarnation. And as usual, would like to, when we receive someone a human being just like us, right? Going through the struggles, the difficulties of life. And I don't say this to make him any smaller or bigger or but to connect with us because it is um, an example of reincarnation to all of us. That when we speak with Julio, despite he's what he goes through, just like us, he's someone who always tries to enlighten us, help us, pushes us to our limits, right? Beyond our limits, right? With his inquisitive ideas, studying Spiritism and working with us as well in our study groups and when we come here to Baltimore. On a more, let's call formal note, I would just like to um, share with you who is Julio. A Brazilian national, has been working as a full-time researcher at the Rockefeller University since 1996, and he's also an adjunct associate professor at the Department of Chemistry and Pharmaceutical Sciences at York College, CUNY, in New York City. He holds several academic degrees, and he is a lecturer for both the physical sciences and the Spiritist doctrine. Introduced to Spiritism at the age of 15, Julio dedicates his time to translating Spiritist books from Portuguese and French into English and disseminating it through lectures. He is particularly interested in studying and explaining the solid logical foundation upon which Spiritist concepts are built, as well as in creating a strong association among those very same concepts. And today, this great mind, this great heart is spending some time here with us today to share this idea of reincarnation. Hopefully, we can take something with us that we can share with our brothers and sisters. That not that we're going to make others believers of reincarnation, but at least to prepare their mind. And I connect with John DeAngela's message to put aside at least the empty hours to propose themselves to something else, something better in the future. So, Julio, please. Reminder, I forgot, is that I would like to ask everyone to hold your questions until the end, and then the end, obviously, we'll open up for questions and comments that you may have. Okay, thank you.
Afternoon, everyone, brothers and sisters here of the physical realm and also from the spiritual realm. It's a pleasure to be here again, and I want to start this lecture in a different way. And I just want to point out that I will not be talking about what reincarnation is or what it's used for, but rather how it came to be. Because I think it's a part that we normally don't address, at least not as often. And I know Leonardo did a terrific job in the opening prayer, but if you allow me, I would like to start this with a special prayer. And I hope by the end of this lecture you understand why. And I want you all to join me in addressing our Creator and asking it for forgiveness. Forgiveness for the way we are going to start this lecture, this thought exercise. We would also like to ask forgiveness to our brothers and sisters of the spiritual realm. Again, for the way we are going to start this thought exercise. It will become clear to all of you by the end, I hope. And for that, I also ask the Creator to bless us with patience, a great deal of patience, especially for us who live in a very mediatist society, and we normally do not allow ourselves 5 minutes So stay with me until the end, and I hope that I will be able to add something, whatever, however small, to your knowledge of Spiritism, to ideas that will help you with consolation. With that in mind, we'll start now our lecture. Pythagoras said that our perception of reality goes through our senses, our physical senses. I have never heard God. I have never seen God. I don't know anyone who has heard God or even seen it. I cannot taste it. I cannot grasp it. There is nothing I can do. Therefore, God does not exist. Pure and simple. I don't know why we make it such a fuss to have it existing if we cannot have any way of sensing through one of our five senses. So, if I am to rely on Pythagoras, God does not exist. Well, by the same token, you, brothers and sisters of the spiritual realm, I'm very sorry. Poof, I have just willed you out of existence because I cannot see you, at least I cannot. I cannot hear you. I cannot grasp, I cannot shake hands with you, I cannot smell you, nothing. And yet I am supposed to believe that you can influence my life as well as I can influence yours, positively or negatively, it doesn't matter. But if I cannot have any proof of your existence through my senses, you do not exist. And worst of all, if you don't exist, then the spiritual realm is a figment of people's imagination. The spiritual realm itself does not exist. And now, if the spiritual realm does not exist, if spirits do not exist, our brothers and sisters from the spiritual realm, God does not exist, then everything remains here. Everything ends up being here in the physical realm. This is the realm I can sense. This is the realm I can interact with through one of my five senses, or even all four, or all five. So this is it. We are left just with the physical realm. So then reincarnation does not exist. Why would you need reincarnation if there's only one realm? Actually, I don't even have to say physical realm anymore. If there is only one realm, it's just here. I don't have to have a special name for it. And all that we learn about cause and consequence ends up being about situation here in the physical realm. So when we look at this, and it's not bad, what we see is no God, no brothers and sisters in the spiritual realm, no spiritual realm for that matter, no reincarnation, and cause and consequence only works here in the physical realm. And now that I have eliminated a lot of my targets, and I have only one left, you, brothers and sisters of the physical realm, I am going to address you. You are, and when I say you, I'm over there. Okay, this is just my mouth and my body moving here. I'm sitting there with you, and I'm going to say you as opposed to we because it's more dramatic. It feels like I'm accusing you. Because it's in a little bit, it is a bit of an accusation. You are an accident. You are a biological, biophysical machine, an accident of atoms, molecules, and all types of compounds that were put together haphazardly and completely randomly, and you're just lucky that you are here today. That's all of it. That's all it is. Nothing more. And that's it. No God, no spiritual realm or its inhabitants, no reincarnation, nothing. And everything that happens here is an accident of biochemistry, an accident of biology, an accident of chemistry, whatever you want to call it, but still an accident. Accident in the sense that it's random, that there is no purpose, nothing. But then, in the Gospel according to Spiritism, there is a lesson where Caritas begins by saying, today I went around and I look at the world. So I will be Caritas now, and I am going to go around the world that is only physical, nothing else. And like I said, populated by biochemical, biophysical accidents, like ourselves, like the plants outside, the animals. And then there is a thought that comes to my mind. If we are accidents, if we are actually nothing more than that, and there's nothing else on the other side, whatever the other side is, then we should be at each other's throats. We should be actually on a rat's race. Well, the cynical among us will say the world is a rat's race. Well, it's not that bad, actually. Because if we look very carefully, as Caritas would do, and as Caritas would tell us to do, we are going to find something very strange. There are people who behave constructively, and some who behave non-constructively. So that keeps me thinking, actually starts me thinking, how is that possible? If we are all accidents, if we are all about just happening biochemically, biologically, chemically, whatever, then there should not be anything guiding me to a proper behavior, to constructiveness. So where is it that these individuals find, what is it that these individuals have, or that they find someplace that let them behave constructively? Notice that I'm trying to say constructively and not good or bad, because my idea here is not to say that these individuals are saints. I'm just saying that they behave constructively more often than others behave. That's what I want to convey. But it doesn't matter. Even if they only behave constructively once, they do. They do so. So the question is, what is prompting them? They should be they should be seeing everybody else as enemies. They should be trying to destroy everybody else. It is a jungle, a rat's race, as we say, right? So this tells me then, to my chagrin, that there has to be some sort of a principle. Don't ask me what the principle is. I'm only here. But there is a principle. What is this principle? Wait a second. We'll get there. It is a principle that is actually telling some of us to behave, or guiding us to behave constructively, and some not behave constructively or behave non-constructively. So, sorry, this is opposite than what I have, so that's why I'm getting a little confused here. So there is this principle. Leave it at that. A principle. This principle then is what I will call the principle of constructiveness, because that's how I got to this principle, logically speaking. I was looking at the world, I was using a fact, an observation, not my wishful thinking, nothing like that, but a fact. I saw, as Caritas told me to do, go around, observe the world, and some people were behaving constructively. Other people were not behaving constructively. So I'm going to call this the principle, and this is the principle of constructiveness. Allows us to behave constructively. So now, I have to think about this. And there are two hypotheses. Stay with me. Hypothesis number one, the principle is one of non-constructiveness. Hypothesis number two, the principle is one of constructiveness. So one hypothesis is negating the other, which means that either one hypothesis is right or the other, but they cannot be both right at the same time. Either the principle is of constructiveness or it is not. So now let us see how this pans out, how we can eliminate one hypothesis in favor of the other. If the principle is one of non-constructiveness, if I want to behave constructively, then I should not have that principle. Because if the principle is of non-constructiveness, in order to behave constructively, I would not have to have it. It would have to be absent in me. Ooh, that is a double negative. Well, just because I don't like double negatives doesn't make this hypothesis wrong. But here's one interesting thing. If the principle is of non-constructiveness, all right, and hypothesis one is correct, how is it that nothing can lead to something? And it is this that eliminates hypothesis number one. Because light exists, darkness does not. Darkness is the absence of light. Evil is actually the absence of goodness. Heat exists, it's energy. Cold does not. Cold is the absence of energy. So the principle has to be the principle of something. So instead of being the principle of non-constructiveness, of an absence, of the absence of an attribute, this principle is that of constructiveness. And that was our hypothesis number two. And now it makes sense because I even eliminate the double negative. For me to behave constructively, I have to have the principle, or I have to have the principle manifest through me. And this is very important. So now I not only have a principle, but I also know that this principle represents constructiveness. Let's keep going. We are observing the physical world. We have not touched any other world, any other realm, any other plane of existence, any other metaphysical state. We are looking at the physical world. We have a principle. This principle is one of constructiveness. But I have just told you at the beginning that some individuals behave constructively and others do not. So what is it? So again, we go back to two hypotheses. Go down to two hypotheses. Either this principle of constructiveness, which now we are going to call it, is ubiquitous, universal, it is everywhere, and something else happens that some individual manifested and others do not. Or the principle is local, is random. It happens here, but it does not happen here. And then it will be a question of where you are and not whether the principle exists. It's whether the principle is there where you are. So when we look at this, when we evaluate what we observe from the physical realm, again, physical realm, we are going to see that in order for us to continue this type of logic, the principle must be present everywhere. It has to be ubiquitous. It has to be universal. It has to be omnipresent. Why is that? Because where it is not present, let us imagine that it's possible for it not to be present at one particular point. Then all the individuals at that point would only be able to behave non-constructively because the principle is not there, and the principle is one of constructiveness. So wherever the principle is absent, everyone should be behaving non-constructively. But that's not what we observe. We observe that side by side in an office, side by side in a classroom, side by side in a bus, we have one individual behaving beautifully, constructively, and the other one behaving in the opposite way. How is it possible for this principle to be so specific? So the principle is of constructiveness, and it's omnipresent. It's everywhere. It's universal. That brings another interesting point. If the principle is not present everywhere, then it's outside our jurisdiction to behave constructively or not. So the principle will be unjust. However, if the principle is everywhere, then the principle is just. Now, I can still decide not to manifest it, but that's my prerogative. It's not that the principle does not exist, it's not there. So now I have the principle. The principle is one of constructiveness, and it is both just and universal. All from observations from the physical realm. Brothers and sisters from the spirituality, gone. God, gone so far. Okay. So the principle exists, is one of constructiveness. It is everywhere. Therefore, it's just, because it's an equitable distribution. Everyone has a chance to bite it, to have a go at it, to use it, to manifest it. But we still observe in life, here in the physical realm, individuals behaving non-constructively. How is that possible? It then comes to this, that we choose to allow this principle to manifest through us, or we choose not to allow it. There is no other way. Because I just said the principle is everywhere. So I cannot hide from it. If I'm in a cave, if I'm under the seas, if I am at the top of a mountain, it doesn't matter where I am, it is there with me. It permeates everything. It's universal. Otherwise, it would not be just. And if it were not just, it wouldn't be of constructiveness. It would be something else. So how is it possible? I look at the world, I do what Caritas told me to do, I observe the human beings, these biological accidents that move around, and I see that some are constructive in most of their actions, thoughts, and speeches, and others are not. They don't have to be that all the time. It doesn't matter. The point is that I observe constructive behavior in some, and I do not observe constructive behavior in others. And I said that it must be a choice. A choice that I have in this case. So how is this possible? So now we have to think of a few hypotheses. And we work and we work and we work, and we end up having three in this case. First hypothesis, the principle is unevenly distributed. And therefore, if it's missing someplace, I cannot behave constructively. So it's out of my will to change that condition. But we can dismiss this hypothesis right away because we just proved that it's just and universal. So it cannot be that one. So then we have a second one. The principle is evenly distributed. It's everywhere, the same amount. No place has more than another. It's evenly distributed. But something here in the physical realm, in some places, precludes it, prevents it from manifesting through us. Whereas in other places, here in the physical realm, that manifestation happens more easily. Okay, with this one, we have not done any harm to this first point that we made because it's evenly distributed, it's universal. But then let me ask you something. If there is something here in the physical realm that blocks this principle from working, from manifesting, in this case or in that case, then the principle is subjected to the laws of the physical realm. But we started the whole point by saying this principle was outside the physical realm. So what is it? Is it outside of the physical realm? Or is it inside the physical realm, belonging to the physical realm? If it belongs to the physical realm, we can just go home because we got back to square one. And now we are in a vicious circle here. We are not going to be able to do anything. So the principle must be outside of the physical realm. I don't know where it is. Notice that I had never said where it is. I just said that it cannot be a part of the physical realm. If it is not a part of the physical realm, there is nothing in the physical realm that can block, hinder, obstruct, or do any harm to it. So hypothesis number 2 is not correct. Because I said, oh, it's evenly distributed, but there's something in the physical realm that prevents us from manifesting it. The principle is above anything from the physical realm. So now we have to find another hypothesis. And we find a third hypothesis, which seems to be one that we will accept. And that goes by saying that the principle is universal. It is of constructiveness. It is everywhere. It's not hindered at all by anything that the physical realm can throw at it. But we choose not to manifest it. It's our choice. Our choice. So, when we talk about this, how is this possible? How is it possible for a person here, let's call this Jane Doe, to manifest it, and John Doe over there does not? Oh, John Doe doesn't want to. Okay, that's very easy to say. But why? Why is it that that individual does not want to manifest it, but this one wants? We know it does not come from the principle. The principle is the same for both of them. It's everywhere, every time, for both of them. But this person here, this individual here, decides not to express it. That one decides to do so. And when we see something like this, we come to the conclusion that there must be something that pushes us to express it and something that pushes us not to do so. You look around and you think education, learning. Education is what teaches this individual to allow this principle to manifest through her, and this one to allow the principle not to go through him, not to be manifested through him. That doesn't fly. I go around the world again, the physical realm, and I observe everything around, everything. And I see that individuals who behave constructively exist in all walks of life, in any salary range, with any type of job, or even in the absence of a job. They're everywhere. Poor and rich alike can be constructive and do behave constructively. And we also see individuals that are not, that are rich and poor, behaving non-constructively. If we look at the history of science, for instance, a lot of individuals at the top of the educational pyramid behaved very, here I'm going even to change the word from non-constructive to non-constructively to destructively. So it's not really about this education, or at least this education that we receive here in the physical realm is not helping me to decide whether I can manifest the principle or not manifest the principle. Because I see, like I said, poorly educated individuals as well as highly educated individuals behaving in one case constructively, and in another set, again, between poorly educated and highly educated, behaving non-constructively. So I come to a conclusion that I need something else. Education alone does not help me. So if I elaborate a hypothesis, it's education. Observation of the world tells me it's not. So a crazy idea comes to mind. These individuals have learned it before this life. When? I don't know. Before. That's enough. That's already enough to make my head spin. Before. I don't know where before is. When before is. Not even where before is. So, if I accept this hypothesis and I keep going with it, I have to accept that in some way or another, I can find a reintegration to the flesh. If I learned this before, and now I am the ones behaving constructively, I must have learned it before. So I must have returned to the flesh with that knowledge. A mechanism of reintegration to the flesh. Don't go there. I didn't say reincarnation. I say a mechanism of reintegration to the flesh. We are not there yet. But do you agree with me? We cannot use education as an explanation. And if we do want to use education, then we must admit that the learning process started before the current time. And that means that somehow, some way or another, there is a mechanism of reintegration to the flesh. Oh, this is a problem. This is a doozy. What does that mean? So, let us think of hypothesis number one. Again, we elaborate hypotheses, we test them, and we eliminate some, and hopefully we get only one at the end. Well, it pays to be, optimistic. Let us imagine, for instance, that I die and I immediately find another body. Poof. I just changed bodies. That's an reintegration to the flesh, isn't it? It's not a problem. I did not violate this point that I'm now trying to elaborate further. Okay, that's our hypothesis number one. When this physicality dies, I immediately go into another one. This is problematic in so many ways. If I just started this whole thing by saying this should be a rat race, a dog-eat-dog world, can you imagine the black market for new bodies? And then imagine, I want to have the body of that superstar, of that supermodel, of that this, or this and that. It would be chaos. And then who would decide who gets what? But it's not just that. There is something else that is quite interesting. What is it that we have today on Earth? About what, 8.5 to 9 billion people? In the history of humankind, we have never, ever reached this number of people here on Earth, in the physical realm. So if we could just go back maybe 50 years, my guess is that it was about 2 billion. It was huge explosion in population growth. Where did the other 6 billion come from? If there is only the physical realm, we didn't have 2 billion, 8 billion, sorry, or 9 billion. We had 2. So we have to find the other 6 billion from someplace else, right? So it's not the question whether the ones dying are going to fight for a new body, but whether there are enough bodies for people, because if we are here and we are interacting with this principle, there should be always the exact same number. I die, poof, I'm reborn in another body. So 1 death minus 1, a new birth plus 1. So the net change is 0. There's no change. There's no increase or decrease. And yet we keep seeing the population of this planet growing, and growing. So we have a surplus of population. We have a cache of people somewhere. I don't know what it is. I really do not know. All I know is one thing. They are not here on Earth. They are also not in any other planet, because we wouldn't be able to survive in any other planet with this physicality. So they have to be in the extra physical, what we call the metaphysical. So there are metaphysical beings. And that explains the surplus of population. We had 2 billion here on Earth, and another 6.5 someplace. And this 6.5 someplace today are all here. Now, it might even be more there. I don't know. Like I said, Pythagoras told me that I could not do anything with my reality beyond my senses. So there it is. So now I have this place, location, whatever you want to call, populated by this surplus of beings, metaphysical beings. Why not call this the metaphysical space, the metaphysical realm? Metaphysical realm. Don't go overboard. But now I have some interesting thing to say. If we have a life here on planet Earth, and we started by saying that cause and consequence apply to it, and somehow we lose this physicality, we go to this metaphysical place, and then we return here, and we're still okay, familiar with life as a human being. It means that life in the metaphysical realm has to be a very good copy of this place. Don't worry about what is a copy of what. Just think of this logically. If I live here, I'm familiar with this, I'm comfortable with this, then this physicality goes away. Then I move, I change addresses to the metaphysical realm, and then I come back here at a certain point, still human, still familiar with it. It means that my stay, my sojourn in the metaphysical realm, or the word that Joanna de Angelis loves to use, my villeggiature in the metaphysical realm, was nothing different. Nothing different than my stay, my villeggiature here in the physical plane. And that, folks, tells me that cause and consequence also works there in this metaphysical plane in the same way that it works here in the physical one. Because there's a continuation from one place to the other. So, this is basically the logical approach, the rationale that I wanted to convey to you. And now I have the most difficult slide to show you, friends, spiritist friends, which is this one, and I don't think it would require much explanation. You just have to read what is there. And we see that a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. For us, Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet, right? And we name these things the principle, the creator. We name these metaphysical beings spirits. We name the metaphysical realm or plane or world or as a spiritual realm. The process that I spoke before, the mechanism of reintegration, not process, but the mechanism of reintegration, we give it a new name, reincarnation, coming back to the flesh. And we see, because we had to reach reincarnation item, this item here, it came after we defined the first one. Do you remember that? It had to be defined by the creator. It had to be defined by constructiveness. It had to be defined by justice and universality. Reincarnation is not a process. Reincarnation is not an event. Reincarnation is nothing more than divine justice and wisdom in motion. And here's an interesting thing. We think we are all that, plus a bag of chips. We are very wrong. Reincarnation existed even before we did. Because God had no beginning. And if reincarnation is the manifestation of divine justice, divine wisdom, divine intelligence, divine plenitude, everything, it already existed even before we had people, spirits, to reincarnate. It's what God is. It's a manifestation of the divine. It is no longer an event. We say, oh, in my next reincarnation process, okay, I will let you do that just for the sake of language, just for the sake of the conversation. But the truth be told, no, it's not. In my next opportunity, we should say. Because That is what it is. God allowing this to move through us. It is already there, has always been there, even before we were put, we came out of the mold, the divine mold, if you want to. And what we see is that cause and consequence is the only law we have. I know at the end of the Spiritist book, there are 10 laws. I'm not saying that the Spiritist book is wrong. Please don't misunderstand me here, okay? But if you squeeze those 10 laws, first of all, you should ask yourselves, 10 commandments, 10 Spiritist laws, I find that a coincidence at the winning the lottery, proportions of winning the lottery, okay? The number 10 is Kabbalistic, has a lot of meaning. So why 10 and then 10 again? But if you squeeze really, really hard, you go to the core, to the crux of each one of them, you will see this little fellow here. Cause and consequence, cause and effect, if you prefer. It's the only divine law. And it makes sense. One God, one principle, love, universal love, constructiveness. Okay? And one means to do it, to carry it out, cause and consequence. The oneness of the creation allows us a logical step in that there is never something else to contradict the first one. This is why we cannot have two gods. Because in order for you to have two gods, one God must be different than the other somehow, so that you can separate them from one and the other, from the other, right? But if for a God to be different than the other, one God must lack something that the other God has. So then they are not complete. They're not perfect. So it has to be one creator, one God, one law, and one principle. And reincarnation is not, an event, it's not a process, it's basically divine justice flowing, which is why it has to be just, which is why it has to be universal. Well, without being universal, we proved it cannot be just. And if it is just and universal, it's that of constructiveness. It cannot be that of the absence of constructiveness, of non-constructiveness, or of destructive behavior. You notice how hard it was for me to keep going with this without saying evil, good, goodness, and ill, because I wanted to move away from these words so that you wouldn't get sidetracked by them, because we are so used to the yin and yang type of approach, okay? That is hard. If I use one of these words, you immediately slide to that. I do too. It's not just you. I do too. This is why I had to use a word that is huge in comparison to good and ill or evil. Constructiveness, and then non-constructiveness. And also, notice that by saying non-constructiveness, I impart on you the idea of the absence of constructiveness, the same way that darkness is the absence of light, in the same way that cold is the absence of heat, of energy. All of this would never, ever make any sense if it weren't for this. So please, don't ask, is this expiation or atonement? Would you ask God that? Would you have the guts to do so? Reincarnation is universal and just. It's God's justice. Then it's only that, period. We don't have to start dividing, oh, this is atonement. Oh, this is a judgmental behavior. And this is what I wanted to show you. I didn't want to talk about what reincarnation is or how many times we come here and why do we go here and why we go there. This we can be for the questions now. But what I really wanted to convey to you is the logic behind it and why reincarnation as the manifestation of divine justice ceases to be a thing and becomes a part of the Creator itself in us. Not a part that we put inside, like we put something in our pockets, like if I do this, with a remote control here. No, but something that flows through us. Without it, the whole scheme ceases to exist. We destroy not only the physical realm, the spiritual realm, but also the physical realm as well. Because we destroy the exchange. We have to have it there. And we also have to have it there so that we can have justice and universality. Because one lifetime is just too short. It's too short already to appreciate the grass growing, the trees, the birds, the skies, right? You've been here at the Spiritist Center. How many books have you studied in all these years that you have been here? And you'll probably say, oh, a few, and you may have been very, very diligent, but you will not be able to watch a lot of them or to debate a lot of them in one lifetime. But you can continue. You can pick up where you left off. Reincarnation is the golden thread, to use a Greek mythology analogy. Reincarnation is the golden thread, okay? Not Jason's vellum, but it's the golden thread with which God stitches together all the happenstances of our entire existence. Reincarnation is the reason why we exist in the first place, and how we can put them all together like we're stringing pearls in one cordon, in one beautiful necklace. Thank you. Open for questions. How did I do with time? Good?
You can keep going if you want to. No.
No. I was, oh, thank you. Okay.
Julio, thank you for the explanation of not how many times will come or whatever we want to call it, but this divine will upon all of us. I would like to bring here perhaps some of the questions that we may have online. Comments. And I'll share with you guys. I'll open up for us over here, also acknowledging our brothers and sisters who are watching us online, but I would like to open for us here. If you have any questions, any comments, anything that you would like to ask Julia about this. I know, as we said at the beginning, it makes us think. It makes us question ourselves and what we have been studying. Rightly so, because I think Spiritism does that as well. I'll pass the mic to Kirsten.
Thank you. Thank you, Julio. This was mind-blowing. So I'm just curious, listening to you, and I mean, some the logic behind it, I could follow it, and it's fascinating. I've never heard it. I just wanted to, I guess, pick your brain and to understand like what went into this, like what, because it's so unique, and it really just, right? Because I mean, we all know what reincarnation is, but this is kind of like, it's kind of like when you watch a Marvel movie and you watch like the prequel or whatever it's called, and it's like, oh, okay, So I'm just curious to know. That's just my question.
It is r- rather simple, actually. This was something I said in one of my gospel at home. I opened the gospel. The topic was reincarnation. I start talking, and then 2.5 hours later, I decided I was getting very hungry, because I eat after my gospel. And I realized when I finished it, closed everything, that 2.5 hours had passed. But that was it. So it's all my idea. I had the gospel open. I had the mentors at home guiding me. I do the gospel at home alone. So the same way that I was walking here, I do the same thing at home. It's as if I have an audience. I don't see anything, by the way. That's a disclaimer right away. Okay, no mediumship at that level. Okay, that's the basal mediumship, like everyone has to just to talk to my spiritual guard or guardian angel, whichever you prefer. Yeah, that's where it came. And then last time when I was here, I really liked when I had this at home. I have a few and I record them. So last time when I was here, I think it was the 24th of June, and Daniel said, "Oh, you can come. You should come back." And he gave me the opportunity. Usually, I ask, "Oh, what you guys are studying?" Because I can kind of fit in, right? And then Daniel said, "No, no, no. You choose. You choose the topic." Like he always said. He always says that. But this time, I decided to take his offer, and I said, "Okay, can I talk about reincarnation?" And I wanted to talk about exactly this, the rationale, not what it is, because we know, but we know it as a process or as a mechanism. And I wanted to show how it came to be, or at least how we can, like I said, this is not, you won't find this in any text. You notice that I started, and this is why I apologize my prayer, because I willed out of existence not only the spiritual brothers and sisters, but also God itself. And I had a problem with that. I was thinking of how to do this without starting in such a dramatic way. But I realized that it was necessary because otherwise the whole thread, the whole logical thread would not be woven so nicely. Yeah, that's it. So my apologies, brothers and sisters, whom I cannot see, still cannot see or hear, and God itself. Like I said, I don't know how to talk to you, but I have willed, if you allow me the conceit and the extreme arrogance, I have at the end, willed you back into existence. I think, redeemed myself.
Thank you. I'm just gonna pass one before I go to you.
I can read it.
I just want to put in this one. I guess everybody can read it here too.
Oh, no, but if you want to have it recorded with voice or no, you don't. Okay. Yeah.
Why it's not going
Which
then?
one?
Okay. Well, I just want to put on the screen. Okay, this one right here. And then let's do that.
Okay, so the question is destruction a part of this principle? Yes. Destruction is a part of cause and consequence, actually. And cause and consequence is the flow of the justice of God, but not in a punitive way, not in a retaliatory way, but as a renewal mechanism. So destruction is necessarily a part of it. You cannot grow anything new on top of something that is rotting, that is broken, that is not working properly. You have to do what? What do we do when we have in our gardens? Don't we prune? Don't we we deadhead the roses, for instance, so that they can bloom nicely the next year? So it is the same thing here. We see it still with a myopic view, a myopic perspective, because we only see things from one reincarnation point. And you see, I am using one reincarnation point. There is no such a thing. From one stay in the physical realm. The stay in the physical realm is not really a reincarnation. Reincarnation is everything, is divine justice. Is its manifestation. So we shouldn't even say, oh, during this reincarnation, I want to do this. Or, no, during my stay in the physical realm, I will do this, this, and that this time. So destruction is a part of it. As hard as it is sometimes for us, imagine if you're thinking of a tsunami or an earthquake, and many, many deaths, right? But remember that these are the deaths of the physical body. In the whole economics of the creation, that's nothing because we survive. I didn't say anything here, but I could have. It's just that I would need to have another line of logic and it would take too long. But um, what represents us then is no longer here. And the reason why I can say this is when I go over there, when I go back to the spiritual realm, now I can say spiritual realm, but when I go back to the metaphysical plane, for instance, right? For me to remain myself, for me to remain Julio, okay? I don't take my body with me because I cannot. This belongs here, but I have to take what represents me. So my essence goes with me, which means it's not in this thing. So this is perishable, erodible. It can deteriorate, disposable.
Thank you, Julio. Alba, please.
Thank you so very much, Julio. I don't have a question, I have a comment. I love logic, and I felt like I was back in school again. I truly, truly enjoyed your presentation. And one of the things that caught my attention in myself is how coming from this 1 hour of logics, the end, the impact that I felt was in my heart. It was like a, God, you're so awesome. It's like, I don't know, I don't have the words to express the joy, isn't it? Just by feeling such love and such justice and such mercy is it's like we were all the time over here and all of a sudden connect to your heart, to your spirit. And by the way, I am not very the first time of reincarnation topic, so I love everything about it because I believe it's love, it's pure love. So thank you, Julia.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Alba. I also feel the same way. Um, and, okay. And I also feel that finally, and hopefully in the future as well, it makes sense why I took statistic when he was talking about hypothesis, right? It makes sense now. For those who took statistics, it's like, okay, now it makes sense. But anyways, if you can say an answer.
So there is a question here. Following this rationale, from where does the concept of good and evil come from? Okay. So we have only the concept of good or goodness in this case, all right? Because evil, the opposite of goodness, is basically just the absence of it. It's just the absence of goodness. And when we speak about good, we mean ill. Okay? So, like I said about heat and cold, cold being the absence of energy, absence of heat, for instance. Heat is just one form of energy, right? Or darkness being the absence of light. So it is. So it is between ill and good, evil and goodness. Ill and evil being the absence of their counterparts. So instead of having a seesaw, like we always like to have, because that gives us a lot of scapegoating mechanisms that are become valid. In other words, lame excuses. That's the technical psychological term for lame excuse. One of them. Instead of having something like a seesaw, what we have is a seesaw with only one side, which means that it doesn't wobble, it doesn't tilt. Okay? You can transform, like in the case of Paul, something that is evil into goodness almost overnight with one motion, one vision, one moment of clarity. If evil was balanced with goodness, in the same way that we have to strive to reach goodness, we would have to strive to move away from evil. And we have, back to Caritas, we have, by observing the world, individuals who can change almost overnight, if not overnight, like in the case of Paul. All right? And remember the words of Joanna de Angelis at the very beginning? Fill your head with good thoughts, good intentions, good works. You don't have to carry them all out. She didn't say that. I mean, if you can, even better. You go from theory to practice. You put things into motion. But fill your head, because if you don't, it's empty. I think Daniel has a question.
So you, okay. So could you help me understand something? So when you said that, when you gave the example of Paul and how, and you mentioned about the seesaw, and you mentioned about, that evil doesn't hold the same, it's not like balanced with good. And then you made a comment about how what you made a comment that made me think, like, are you saying that it doesn't take work to go from being in the darkness to get to the light? Is that what you were saying?
No, it sounded like, I apologize. What I want to say, to convey, is this. We have forever to reach plenitude. And it's always in small increments. Because there is a difference between information, formation, or not, sorry, information, knowledge, and then formation or maturation. Not maturity, maturation. So let me see if I can give you an analogy. And you want to make muffins. You Google a recipe. You have never made them. You Google a recipe. The recipe that you get from Google, or any other web browser for that matter. I don't have stocks from Google. The recipe is information. It doesn't make you any good of a cook. Anyone can be a chef just by Googling recipes, famous ones. But are you really? It's when you get to the stove that you actually burn or fly high, right? So now you make that recipe the first time. And you make it for the second time. And then after a few times, few rounds, always eating everything before you go for the next one, you realize that the recipe wasn't correctly written, or something was missing, not out of malice or anything. So now you have enough experience to look at it a little bit, to judge, not being judgmental, to judge, to evaluate, to assess, to appraise, okay? That's what I mean by that, because that's what we have to do. We have to have our brains out of neutral. It has to be on, full gear. So this now is knowledge. It's no longer just information. You already have, and knowledge doesn't mean that you have memorized the recipe. You can still, you might still need to look back to your recipe book where you wrote it down. That's not about memorization or learning by rote. It's the fact that now you can look at it and you no longer have to do it like this. All right? You can now read quickly and then come over here and do it, and you are in control of the operations. So that is knowledge. And one day you decide, maybe if I put some pieces of pecan, it will be even better, even tastier. So now you start experimenting with it. And you can only start experimenting with it successfully, because some people are, like I said at the very beginning, we are very immediatist, but you can only do it successfully after you have reached some knowledge of it. That's your maturation. So in life is the same thing. You do your homework. Remember the first time you learned, you wrote your name. God, it took you what? Half an hour to go through 5 letters, like in my case. I am so, so sorry for those Russian, Ukrainian, all of the Cyrillic languages that have these huge, very long names. Thinking, my God, if it took me half an hour to go through 5 letters, imagine for them. So, in this case, it was much better to be named Julio than Alexander. So think about it. It was a struggle from the first letter, and then when you finish and you were all proud of it, and you looked, and now you look at it and you see that it's like like a mouse was moving around the page, right? One letter is here, the other one is all the way down here, the other one goes all the way up there. It's like a mess, and then you don't have a lot of control over what is uppercase, lowercase. It's a mess. But then you wrote it again and again and again. And today, if I give you a pen and I say, well, here's a check for you, you will sign it with your eyes closed. Okay? Mind you that I never said whom the check was for. Anyway, you got the point. So in evil now, for evil, we can have a moment of clarity. We can have an insight moment, as we say in psychology. And that is a tremendous power. And because evil happens when we are denying the presence of the principle, but the principle is always there, the moment that we relax our guard, that we allow it to flow through us, that's it. So the effort, comparatively speaking, the effort for every increment from evil to less evil happens much faster. It also happens with less of a struggle because it is already there. We're just denying it to ourselves, but not towards goodness. In goodness, we have to create a new state. In goodness, we have to mature. That takes a lot of muffins, a lot of iterations at the stove, and many, many, many pages of calligraphy. Do you want me to read another
No,
one?
I just have a question. I think the last question, right? Because you don't have any question more from the. Okay, so first of all, thank you, Julio. I think
You're
was
welcome.
very well put, and I'm pretty sure you have a great inspiration from your mentors to put together this lecture. Um, in a practical way, um, my question is, by knowing this information, by have this rational approach, how can someone that is really suffering, who have existential crisis, even like mental health, um, can benefit from this knowledge, from this information? In a practical way, how would you say, if someone comes here to this center now to receive, a consolation message and hear your thoughts, or your lecture, your presentation, or go to the YouTube and watch this presentation, how is your expectation that that person will be consoled or change based on this approach that you have? I felt consolate. I like it, and I think this will help. But going through the masses, how this knowledge will help them in a practical way.
I'm going to give you first a general answer. Whenever we have a situation like that, when we have a person that comes to us in dire need, this is not the moment to philosophize. Okay, this is not the moment to go and decide, let us read Genesis or Evolution in Two Worlds. Okay, this is a moment for no solar. This is a moment for missionaries of the light. This is a moment for the book we just read, Happy Life. Short readings, beautiful passages, inspiring, consoling, at least empathic. It's an error in judgment on our part, and this is everyone. Okay, we are learning, but it's an error, nevertheless, on our part to try to squeeze in, let's say, half an hour the person has to talk to us before we start the study group, for instance. All that we have learned from Spiritism. Perhaps all of you here right now are feeling some form of gratitude for this, consolation for this, but perhaps because you're not facing a terminal illness, or because you're not facing some difficulty, some vicissitude at the extreme. All right? Or because you have already opened your mind to other things, and that is very personal. So I would say that this type of approach, if the person, let's say, came here and watched and did not know that it would be something like this, I would say to this person, look, that God loves, period. You don't even have to say a lot, because it's universal love. It's everywhere, every time, for everyone. There is no bias, no prejudice. It is always there. It never, like Jesus said, it's a branch where if you pick and you leave the branches, if it's a tree whose branches will become bare if you pick them all, don't worry. I will take those branches to my Father who's in heaven, and he will make them flourish, and he'll make the fruits grow back again. And I will do this as many times as you leave it bare. So it's this love. And now that we put reincarnation, here's for that now for the individual that is going through difficult times. We all have vicissitudes every now and again. Remember this, that now reincarnation is no longer atonement. There is a lot of guilt when people come to the Spiritist Center and we start talking. Unfortunately, we don't know everyone's life, right? So it's not that we do out of malice. But when we start dividing things into atonement and expiation and this and that, that individual there begins to feel guilty. Guilty for being in one condition, because if that individual, for instance, sees himself or herself as going through expiation, which is much worse when we define it than atonement, that person says, oh my God, and then comes the linear logic that kills a lot of people that come to Spiritist centers. Oh, I must have been a terrible, terrible individual in my past life. That's not the case. You could have been that, I don't know, 10 reincarnations ago, and you have been progressing beautifully. And now this is the time for you to, let's say, pay the last cent of the debt. But you have already progressed beyond it. So we have to be very careful with this. When I call linear logic, I mean is this A to B only, and there's no other path. It is not like that. And sometimes the language we have in the books, the language that we use when we are discussing the books, gives that impression. Like I said, it's not out of malice. We don't plan to do it that way, but it comes out that way. We have to remember that the one suffering has all its sensitivity, its radar of sensitivity tuned to the max, amplified to the max. So tiny little things that for us would not even be a tiny sting, for them is like a crushing blow. So remember this. Reincarnation is God's justice. It is for us to be here and again and again and again until we reach the perfection, until we can commune with God itself.
Julio, thank you. If I may exhaust questions or comments that we may
Please.
have, and I think you gave a couple different examples there. One that I would go back to as far as the two individuals, one that is constructive with the other was being non-constructive, right? And you also gave this beautiful example of the baking a cake, baking a good, right? where we are at this point now in our lives where we can read. Perhaps we are already in a position where we take that information and we're processing it, right? But I want to, with your understanding, since you presented this, since you have this insight, what can we do to decide more towards the constructed, or lean towards the constructive rather than non-constructive way of life?
It is said that for someone to become a virtuoso in any musical instrument, you have to rehearse at least 10,000 times. This is not a number that some people dreamed about and just threw it there, dreamt about and just, that's it, 10,000. No, this is from evaluating and analyzing and observing, back to Caritas' um, recommendation to all of us, observing those who became virtuosos, either as the prima donnas, the prima uomos of operas, or even of virtuosos in the violin, the piano, you name it, guitar, right? So practice, 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 practice. And they are not virtuosos in the whole orchestra, and all the instruments of an orchestra. They picked one. This reincarnation is short. We even say that it's too short to appreciate art, right? The famous quote. Art is beyond the length of life we have here to be appreciated in full. So pick one problem. Pick one side of your personality. Pick one issue that you're having, something, and practice, practice, practice. Well, today we have the information at the tip of our fingers, right? We can go on the web and boom, we just type it up. We even with our mobile phones, and that's it. That's just information. And people sometimes think that that is knowledge. It is not. Knowledge is when you start picking different points of information, different pieces of information, and stitching them together and making a coherent sense of all of them together. But you also have to put them into practice many, many times over to mature. When we mature, whatever it is that we are trying to do there becomes second nature to us. And then we do with our eyes closed, like signing that check if I see it's a lottery check for you. Okay? You'll be able to write pretty well, even with your eyes closed. You would never, ever be able to do that if you were just learning how to, scribble the first letters on a piece of paper. So practice.
Thank you so much, Julio,
You're welcome.
for
Thank
this,
you all.
again, insight, and make us think and really appreciate ever more this idea, this connection with God that we can all make, right? We would like to stop over here, and we will invite everyone to also take the time to reflect on this message as we provide the passes as well. We will dim the lights. We'll say a short prayer, and we will also, then you can close this.